Welcome back to another week of the TapRooT podcast. This week I'm joined by Ken and Marcus, and we're going to be talking about are uncareful people to blame. Now, this comes from a conversation. Mark had written an article about a real incident that had happened to him. Back in the 90s, he was doing a briefing about root cause analysis for a refinery. And one of the HSE managers at the site, he was kind of coming off as we don't need root cause analysis. I already know the cause of accidents. And he came with some facts, some data. He said 90% of our accidents are caused by only 5% of the workforce. And he's kind of like, well, we don't need it. I don't need investigators. All I need is more cops to go out and find problems. And he's like, well, what would you do to fix this? And Mark said, well, the answer is obvious and easy. All you have to do is fire those 5%. If that's really the case, that 5% of your workers are causing the trouble, just fire those 5% and you'll be good. Mm-hmm. Now, I think we recognize that there's a lot to unpack from an organization that's looking at that from a blame standpoint. But right. What's kind of your initial take? Are uncareful people to blame for accidents?
Well, it's hard to even throw the word. I hate any time the word blame throws in. It's just kind of the answer is no. But are uncareful people out there? That's a question. Yes, there are people who aren't careful, and that's because humans are not careful. It's just how we all are. Nobody, if you tell them, hey, be careful out there, right? That sounds great on whatever that show was. What was that show? Hey, let's all be careful out there. That old cop show that used to be on.
That was way before my time, obviously.
Now I'm going to have to go look it up. But, I mean, that's good until you walk out the door. And it's the same when you tell people, hey, drive careful. Yeah. People don't do that. That's just not what we do.
They drive their normal behavior. They drive
normal. That's right. It's not we try to be uncareful. We just drive normal,
and every time you're not careful and you're successful, then you get that false sense of security that, oh, this is okay. Yep. Nothing happened. I took this chance, or I took this shortcut, or I saved this time and effort, and everything's okay. Fine. Yeah. So now this becomes normal for me.
Well, anytime I hear this statistic, right? So this is actually a very common statistic that I've heard before. I remember we did an article on 95% of auto accidents are caused by human error. And that was a report that had been released. And again, when you think about that, it's like, well, of course, somebody made a mistake.
Sounds kind of low to me, actually, but okay.
There aren't a bunch of meteorites hitting cars that are causing auto accidents. But like in this case, 90% are caused by only 5% of the workforce. And, that sounds like it's something impactful, but in reality, what that just means is only 5% of your workforce is the ones that got impacted because you're not having accidents every day.
Right.
I mean, if everyone in your industry was maimed, that would be a completely different kind of signal that you're getting. But most industries, at least modern industries, aren't that dangerous where every worker is getting impacted.
If you have 1,000 people in your workforce and you only have, 10 incidents, well, that's 1% of your workforce. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that only 1% of the workforce is making mistakes. It just means that's the only ones that have
everything lined up wrong that day
for those
guys. Allowed the mistake to turn into something bad. But people are making mistakes all the time.
It's kind of a silly statistic. It doesn't really make sense when you think about it. It doesn't.
Yeah, it's not that you only have 5% of workers are unsafe. So I think this ties into a concept of unsafe acts. So there's a lot of behavior-based safety models, and nowadays they would call them error traps and precursors. And there's a lot of things that if we can just get people to not do these error trap positions or, look for bad acts, we'll fix all of our problems because we'll catch those issues. And I think there's definitely a amount of safety that gets distracted by looking for and being, as this person had said, if I had more cops. Now, have you guys ever heard what COP stands for, safety cop, what it stands for?
No.
So it's catch only to punish. Catch only to punish. That's what a safety cop is. They're there to catch and punish. And I can think of some safety cops that I've met in my life that would be doing. They do their walks and they're looking for some violation. I always heard that if you did an audit and you didn't find something, you didn't do a very good audit. And so there was always that mindset that people had is we're looking for something to catch.
But the other side of that is you get really good at catching people doing things wrong, right? Not great for your culture if you're just catching them doing something wrong. But how do you address it when they catch them doing something wrong? Like, are they really fixing it, or are they just telling them, well, you're doing it wrong, be more careful? So maybe they're identifying problems that they could prevent incidents, but they're not doing what they need to do with those problems. They're not properly analyzing those problems and figuring out, well, we don't just need to fix it with a Band-Aid and retrain somebody or tell them to be more careful. We need to truly analyze the situation they were in at the time and find our root causes.
Well, and that comes to the difference of like our auditing model, where we say, okay, if you're going to do an audit, when you find that nonconformity, it's not, we'll just tell them to follow the rule next time. It's to take, just even if you do the simple, it's just to take a short period and say, okay, let's run through the 15 questions in TapRooT. Is there anything human performance related to this nonconformity that I can at least get some information on and find out more about?
Yeah, I want to make sure we're clear too. We're not, I don't think any of us here are saying, hey, don't go look for problems. That's not what we're saying. Sure. I think it is critical that if you ever see me step up in my soapbox, you should be out there doing proactive audits and looking for problems. It's your response to the findings is what the difference is. And having cops out there who are going to go catch these 5% of people who are the only ones doing things wrong and fixing them guys is probably not the right answer in this case.
Yeah, and I think we, in TapRooT specifically, we definitely say people are going to make mistakes, and we say that the human error, we call it human performance difficulty, but that's the start of your investigation. It's not the end point. We know that somebody's going to make a mistake. We know they're going to have, been in a hurry or touched a button that they shouldn't have touched or broken a rule they shouldn't have broken, right? That is a starting point in investigation, and it's our responsibility as investigators to understand the context behind it, understand what in our system was allowing them to do this or encouraging them to do this. So I think there's definitely, a tie to this. Now, the second part to that story that Mark had was after he told the guy, well, you should just fire them. The guy acted like, oh. He goes, well, I can't fire them. And it's like, why? Oh, we're a union shop, so you can't just fire somebody. And it's like, oh, so you have to then look at your system then. You can't afford to just fire them. And I've always found that, people that, and I've known supervisors that were this way, that were like, you just got to fire the bad workers. And they think they'll solve their problems through firing. And Mark was not telling him he would solve, but
absolutely.
The idea is that it's silly to think that you're just going to fire your way to a world-class safety culture. I certainly have seen safety cultures through hiring of leadership that have created a world-class safety problem, or have brought in a good leader who's going to foster the right kind of culture. But it's rarely that at the operative level, firing one person is the fix for any of solution.
Right. It's pretty rare that anybody comes to their work in the morning expecting or planning on making a mistake and making an error and doing something wrong. People don't come to work with that thought in mind. So when they do make these mistakes, it's your job as an investigator to figure out, well, why did they do it? What is the human performance problem that allowed them or encouraged them to make those errors?
And I think in our training, that's where I see a lot of the aha moments is when we're talking about that blame culture and punishing people for mistakes or retraining their way out of problems, is that moment when they understand, well, everybody's motivated. Like, no matter what part of your life you're in, you're motivated to save time and effort, right? Like, everything we do, every rule we break, I'm sure you can go back to, how did it save me time? How did it save me effort?
Yep, and maybe some money. We'll throw money in there.
And their money, right. Well, and then once they start to understand, well, anybody could have been in this situation. If we didn't, as a company, tell them it's not okay when they did it the first time, well, they're going to do it a second time. And everybody who sees them do it and save time and effort, they're going to do it that way. So
it must be the right way to do it.
Yeah,
right?
So it's not the people that's the problem. It's the way we manage people or the systems we have in place to monitor behaviors and drive behaviors towards compliance or non-compliance with how we decide to handle it.
Now, I would push that's the majority of people and the majority of companies aren't dealing with, let's say, as Ken said, people wanting to get hurt. I would push to the jaded safety person, because I have known this to happen. At least 2 cases that I can think of there are people that do come to get injured and get on work comp and get on disabilities. So I have personally seen at least 1 case of this, and that's one of those hiring things that you always have those. HR has those stories about that person, and they look at their work history and they're like, it's conveniently lines up with when you're, so their disability comes off or something like that. They're back in.
I think that's such a low percentage, though, and if that's what your company is concentrating on, looking for them, you're really missing the other wide.
I think there's definitely some people that need to be aware of that as a problem in your company, but at the same time, as a safety professional, the vast majority of your employees are not doing that.
But that's a beautiful thing about TapRooT too. It doesn't matter if it's intentional or not intentional. You handle that the same exact way with the standardized process, the investigation. You gather your evidence, the context around these mistakes, and as you take it through the analysis, you're going to find that if it's just this one person this time, if you check the boxes that, hey, we communicated it well, we're enforcing it well, there's a high accountability, everybody else knows how it's supposed to be, it's this one person this one time, well, then you can go that discipline route, because you've proven to anybody that needs to know, regulatory agencies, HR, leadership, that look, as a company, we're doing everything we can to help people make the right decisions and force them to compliance. Here's the evidence in this case that it was the person that we need to talk about.
And it's a fairly small percentage. Again, if your company has a high percentage of people who are out there trying to get on workers' comp, you still have a problem at your company. That's not the people. You still have a culture issue. So it's
there is still something you can do.
There's still something you need to work on, right?
And
more generically.
More
generic problem.
And I think this ties back to unions. And I know we're pretty friendly with unions because of that fact. Is we very much point the evidence back to prove that you're doing what you need to as an organization before you discipline employees.
Right.
It's not that discipline doesn't have a place in TapRooT. It has one. It's just you've got to prove that you as a company are doing the things you need to do before. And so it works really well with unions because they can, 1, see the evidence, and 2, they can see that we've shown evidence that leadership is doing what it needs to do to make sure this rule is being followed, and it's just the individual here that's not following it. It's not a systemic issue, it's a specific person that needs to be corrected in their behavior.
And if you do find that, it's always nice to have that evidence that it reinforces all the good things you're doing as a company to protect yourselves. So that reinforcement allows everybody to understand, hey, what we're doing is really good. We don't need to stop doing this. Right? It kind of reinforces that behavior as a company.
Well, I think there's also and maybe this is a different conversation too, with when we think of like safety culture. I see a lot of techniques that say, oh, we don't need a root cause analysis because we're going to do learning teams, or we're going to do some other technique. That's I always call them, it's brainstorming with different steps. But those techniques, they don't often have this opportunity to challenge your management system and challenge what leadership from a cultural standpoint is doing. It relies on the person to know, oh, we have a bad safety culture here. Well, even if you have a good safety culture, somebody's going to gripe about the safety culture in it.
Right. There's always something.
And so it doesn't allow, those systems don't allow for people to have a way of showing evidence to what in your safety culture needs changing and needs direction. And again, TapRooT, we have a whole section, there's a whole group of questions that guide you to look at management system. And Mark always says question 14 is an automatic yes, because there's always something management can do differently. We should always be looking at the management system. It was his favorite root cause category. But I think having a system that's guiding you to look at management system is going to not just say, oh, the worker's to blame, or oh, management, or oh, culture, but it really makes the evidence come up. What are we doing to set people up for success or set them up for failure, and move that accountability to where it's needed and where it's reasonable, and not just, oh, somebody made another mistake, let's retrain them and get on with our lives.
Well, I know most investigators aren't human performance experts, and the thing I like best when we're going out there and training and watching people adopt TapRooT is getting them to understand, here's the evidence that's critical to capture if you want an effective root cause analysis. Let's take the anxiety of man, am I asking the right questions? What else do I need to uncover? Like, let's take all that away and just follow a process where here's the type of questions we need to ask, here's the evidence we need to collect, and if we do a good job with that, the rest of it's easy. Right?
Yep.
Now, how often do you guys hear that management doesn't want to hear about its problems?
I hear that some. I don't know if I'd say it's common. It's not unheard of. I have heard that, my boss or the company is just looking to make sure they're blaming the contractors, for example.
I've
we don't
heard
want to
that,
look,
yes.
that I've heard, which I think is a subcategory of that, where management is those guys over there. They're always a problem. Those subcontractors, they're always an issue, and so I have heard that piece of it. Yeah.
And the other issue I hear sometimes is, here's what management wants to do based on very little information.
Right.
Like they're jumping to conclusions, and they're looking for a way to fix things pretty quick and move on to the next.
And what we usually find is that as long as when those kind of pushback comes up, you just have to point out that, hey, evidence-based systems, it really doesn't matter what management wants. It's what shows up when you do your evidence collection. And if you're just doing a brainstorming type evidence collection, it easily guides you into whatever management wants. But if you have a structured evidence collection process that's asking good questions and make sure you're not missing anything, it guides you away from whatever management wants, and it's whatever reality is at that point.
And I think it's clear that when you have structure to get away from just the blame, because again, I think of like just different biases that I've had over my career. I remember early on, one of my mentors was very much a, fix people kind of mentor. And again, you learn a lot from the old school supervisors, but at the same time, you can recognize looking back that, there were, people that made lots of mistakes. And my approach as a young supervisor was not, what do we change in the system? It was, if this person makes another mistake, if I can't deal with it.
If I catch him doing this again.
And it was like, oh man, you've got so-and-so running the machine today. I know I'm going to be over there with a problem. And it was like you start to see people as a problem and not see them as, something we can support in a different way, or set them up for success. It was like, how do I work around this person that I know is going to screw up today? And like that tells you that, one, your system is very weak at human performance because it relies on that person to do so much correctly.
That's really where a lot of those brainstorming kind of systems end up. They're like, that guy's, okay, here's our problem. The problem is the human. All right, what am I going to put in place to basically compensate for this bad human? What am I going to do about it?
How am I going to retrain this person again?
And that's a lot of times where these kind of brainstorming and learning team kind of things get to is what safeguards am I going to put in place because I got a bad person over here, and they don't really think to themselves, what can I do because this person is having problems? What can I do to support that person and make it so they don't have the problems?
And I wonder how many times like an organization fires this person, brings in a new person, the new person has the exact same problems. Yeah. And that's when they realize, we needed to change this about our training process, or we need to get them a new tool.
A different tool.
And you had to learn it by like firing your way through 3 or 4 people. And
that's expensive.
It is.
That's real expensive.
Well, not just from the mistakes point of like how much does a mistake cost your organization, but also just from the time commitment. You're putting a person training somebody 3 different times.
Yeah, the churn of employees, that gets really expensive fast.
And everybody thinks it's cheap, right? They think discipline, training, and rewriting procedures is the cheap corrective actions, but in reality, it takes a lot of resources to do those 3, and they're just not as effective as some of the other things you could have been doing.
Yeah, I think it's easy to approve those type of corrective actions, like you said. On the surface, you're just looking at that one person, and you're like, it doesn't cost a lot to retrain them, and they'll be more careful next time. And we're hoping that works. And we got to burn that bridge of hope, really, instead of just treating the symptoms. Find the system weaknesses that we need to improve upon, so we're not in this situation again. Our people feel better supported.
It's real easy not to dig deep. just to take that surface thing and throw an answer at it. And unfortunately, you just end up doing it over and over and over again.
And in the long run, that takes much more time and much more expensive.
So instead of taking much more time doing the same thing again and again and expecting different results, blaming the new person of the day, what would be the alternative? What would we want people to take away and learn and take action on this?
So I don't want to give the wrong impression that learning teams or getting the smart people, the right people in the room to discuss problems, that's not the issue.
No.
Right? I think not having a standardized way to identify problems and analyze it with an evidence-based process, right? The people shouldn't be leading where the root causes are found. It should be the evidence that they collect. So we need smart people in the room that understand the process, the job, the task. Supervisors, people on the front line, management, get together and discuss and find out exactly what context or what conditions were around the mistakes. And when you grab that evidence and you start to really figure out what was going on, the blame goes away because people start to see, oh, anybody could have been in this position. Right. But then using that evidence to figure out where your system weaknesses or root causes are so you can concentrate on how do we better support our people moving forward. I mean, standardizing that process and making it easy, that's invaluable.
Yeah.
And where would I get training on how to do this, Marcus?
Where would that be?
Where would that be?
Well, my suggestion would be attend a 5-day TapRooT advanced training course and learn all about the human performance principles that TapRooT root cause tree and dictionary built on. Learn the different investigation techniques that will help people gather that crucial evidence like critical human action profiling, change analysis, safeguard analysis. Make it easy for your people to gather the right type of information. Because once you do that, like I said before, the rest of it's incredibly easy because it's just a process to follow.
Right, step by step.
You're letting the evidence answer questions and get into the root causes. And you don't have to think about it. You don't have to analyze it yourself. You don't have to be the expert. You let the evidence speak for itself.
Mm-hmm. So the 5-day course and the 2-day TapRooT course are both great options for people. I'd push also that at the TapRooT Summit, we do an auditing course. Mm-hmm. So we talked in this one about, sometimes when you're auditing, you're going to find a nonconformity. We do that TapRooT auditing course there, and we do a stopping human error course. Because again, looking proactively, I think, is just as important for these kind of things. We talk about behavior-based safety programs and other auditing. We want to have a proactive program. And so the 5-day course is great. 2-day course are great for reactive. 5-day touches a little on the proactive. Mm-hmm. But your auditing 2-day course that you do and then the human error course that Mark and I do, I think both of those are great options for learning how to apply the process proactively.
And I would argue the auditing piece, the proactive piece, is even more important. That's what saves lives.
Yep.
Right? You're fixing things before they have a chance to line up exactly wrong and cause somebody to lose their life.
That's really a big piece of, when we look back at, is it uncareful people. Well, all of your people are uncareful, and if you're not looking for it ahead of time, using an auditing tool and using TapRooT to go look proactively, then these uncareful people, which are all of us, are going to continue doing uncareful things. So it's a critical way of catching, and it's no longer the 5%, it's all of us when you start looking at that.
Yeah, how many times do you out there seeing somebody breaking rules or taking shortcuts because, we're in a time crunch, we got too much to do.
They don't have the right tools.
They don't have the right tools, so they take shortcuts and they get the job done, and everybody's pretty happy with the results.
Because the job's done.
Hey, attaboy.
Good job.
And then they'll take a shortcut and another safeguard fails, and then all of a sudden we have this injury or an incident, and now the conversation's completely different for the same behavior. Mm-hmm. It's like, why'd you do that? We don't train you to do it like that. Why'd you take that? Was so dumb. Well, now you got somebody hurt. Like, what's happening? And then your workforce is like,
what am I supposed to be doing here? I thought that was a standard.
I just got an attaboy for that last week.
Yep.
So we're treating people based on different results instead of.
And you can find that during those auditing exercises, going out and do observations and audits. Yep.
So if you guys need more training and understanding how to go beyond just uncareful people and get actually to fixable root causes, you can check out the links to the TapRooT training down below. As always, subscribe and hit the notification bell. And if you disagree and think it's all uncareful people, tell us why down in the comments below. As always, thanks for joining the TapRooT podcast, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye. Thank you.